Alright, hello everybody. This is your local pseudo-intellectual AW, aka Antonio Wolf, aka, I don't know what other people call me. Oh wait, was it Jason Unruh?
Yeah,
Well, not him, but whoever made that meme, whoever it was, by the way, great job. Aka Anal Water.
you're also me.
AKA everybody who agrees with me is actually just a suck pock, a sock puppet. Sock puppet of mine. Whoever posted me on Shit Left to Say, good meme, good meme. The messages were pretty funny. I mean, the comments. I agree. You know, you guys should not listen to me. I am a sued. I don't know my shit. And if you think I know my shit, what the hell is wrong with you?
You're just a Hegel worshipping liberal.
Yeah, literally. But seriously, don't listen to me. Go read your own shit. Think for yourself. But anyways, today we're gonna read Marx on private property and communism, mainly because it was a thread on Lefty Poll, considering the difference of private and personal property. And in that thread, I was, honest to God, talking out of my ass. But nobody could really actually call me out on that because, you know, people are too stupid and ignorant. So let's see what Marx actually has to really say about property. And I'm not taking, you know, his 1844 here is all the Marx ever said about private property and blah, blah, blah. But let's see what he said in the 1844 manuscripts. I don't think his idea really changes that much over time. But anyways, I'm here with myself, my other self, Groucho Marx, Grouch. There's my other self, Hyperion, the fourth self, Joshua, and a fifth self, Uncle Funkle. And then there's my Jewish alter ego is not here today, so you know, unfortunately we lack that. But the rest of the gang is here. You know, it's just expanding sock puppets. It's all in my head. I'm just a really good actor.
Maybe the Nazbols will continue listening because the Jewish person isn't here.
I forgot about that. Let's get to it so it isn't over 2 hours.
But who cares if it's over 2 hours? People don't want to listen to us read anyways. They just listen to it dance.
Oh, yeah, true.
Private property and communism. This is obviously in the middle of 1844 manuscripts, but the manuscripts are a broken mess of notes and things and comments, so it doesn't really quite matter that we're jumping into the middle here. And if it does, you can tell us. And I can continue to just not care. So starting off, the antithesis between lack of property and property, so long as it is not comprehended as the antithesis of labor and capital, still remains an indifferent antithesis, not grasped in its active connection, in its internal relation, not yet grasped as a contradiction. It can find expression in this first form even without the advanced development of private property, as in ancient Rome, Turkey, etc. It does not yet appear as having been established by private property itself, but labor, the subjective essence of private property, as exclusion of property, and capital, objective labor as exclusion of labor, constitute private property as its developed state of contradiction, hence a dynamic relationship driving towards resolution. So that's pretty dense. I mean, that's not joking. I mean, that's pretty dense. Marx is saying quite a bit here. That's going off other things that he's written before this. So with that first sentence, the antithesis between lack of property and property, so long as it is not comprehended as the antithesis of labor and capital, still remains an indifferent antithesis, not grasped in its active connection, in its internal relation, not yet grasped as a contradiction.
I guess he's talking about like here the early bourgeois socialists or the Proudhonists who just want to transfer property into the hands of like decentralize it. And he's saying it's not really the issue.
Yeah, that could be. I mean, these definitely are a lot of critiques of other people as well. So I think here the lack is the problem that he's trying to address is that simply saying that the problem is that some people have and some other people have not is to miss out on the actual relation of why people have and others do not have. That the reason labor does not have and capital does have, that capital is what owns the means of production, but labor does not. That is the internal contradiction of property as such within capitalism. I don't know if he's universalizing it, if he's saying, a typical Hegelian point of it's the truth of properties, so to say, that this is the real reason, property is as it is, and the relations of property are the distribution of property is as it is. So it can find expression in this first form, even without the advanced development of private property, as in ancient Rome, Turkey, etc. So I suppose the antithesis of labor and capital is the first form of private property, but that doesn't seem right.
No, I think he's talking about the antithesis between lack of property and property.
Yeah, it's not clear what this is referring to. I think it must be referring to what he's talking about before, that labor and capital, but or yeah, it might be the lack of property and property. So it does not yet appear as having been established by private property itself. And by private property here, he's talking about capital. So, capital is what is private property. It is what has private property, or has property at all, as means of production. But labor, the subjective essence of private property as exclusion of property, and capital, objective labor as exclusion of labor, constitute private property as its developed state of contradiction, hence a dynamic relationship towards resolution. Alright, so what do you think about this? Labor, the subjective essence of private property as exclusion of property. Is he trying to talk about the essence in the way that the dependencies work? Kind of like how, say, for example, that some people think that the essence of like material things, like a table, is really the atoms or whatever, because that's the real things upon which it really depends on. So does private property depend on labor? I think Marx would say obviously yes. And in that sense it makes sense, but in other ways I'm not quite sure what he's saying. Hello? Did I cut out? Hello?
I can still hear you.
Hyperion? Hello?
Hello?
Did you cut out?
Yeah. We're on the first paragraph still?
Yeah, did you not
Yeah.
hear everything I said?
Sorry, no.
Fucking hell. Okay, what do you think about that last sentence on the subjective essence of private property is labor? What do you think he means by that? I was saying I mentioned that I thought this might be a sort of Hegelian sense of essence of dependency. You know, just like a table. A table depends on its atoms, so the essence are really the atoms. So that kind of essence, because otherwise I don't know, it doesn't make much sense to me. But you know,
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. Labor, the subjective essence of private property. Yeah, it's dependent on it, but as exclusion of property. I mean, I'm thinking about like working like labor towards gaining property.
well, I
But
mean,
other than that, I can't really think of it.
here, let's remember that he's by labor and labor against capital. He's talking about the worker against capital.
Yeah,
So the worker, you know, is
they don't
their
have
labor.
property.
Their labor is the essence of private property. It's what it depends
Yes.
on, but they don't have property, according to Marx.
Yeah.
I will just outright say it. I don't agree with this. I don't think this
Well-
is true at all. I think Marx reverses himself by the time of Capital and realizes this is not true.
Do you think so?
Well,
Yeah,
yeah,
in
he
this-
realizes because labor power, they do own labor power. Labor does
Sure,
have
but-
property,
Yeah, but they don't own the property,
but they own labor power.
is what he means
That is
here,
their property.
I think.
Oh yeah, well he's talking
but
about
yeah.
property in general, private property
Yeah.
specifically as the means of production.
Yeah.
But jumping at this point, it's not clear to me. You know, that is exactly what he's talking about.
What did anyone else say?
Nothing. So in the dynamic of labor and capital, the dynamics of the relationship of property, hence have a dynamic relationship of driving towards resolution.
There are a lot of commas in this. Hard to keep up.
So, I mean, he's hinting here at a dialectical movement.
I think he's hinting at he believes the inner contradictions of property will lead to communism.
Oh yeah, that's the implication. But the question is how this plays out. So the dynamic between labor and capital is the dynamic between the contradiction of private property itself. Meaning that in having private property at all, we have a social contradiction, which by the nature of contradictions will have to either be resolved or, you know, dissolve itself. So that's where the movement comes on, this contradiction, this clash. So continuing. The transcendence of self-estrangement follows the same course as self-estrangement. Private property is first considered only in its objective aspect, but nevertheless with labor as its essence. Its form of existence is therefore capital, which is to be annulled as such. Proudhon, quoting Proudhon. Proudhon, or a particular form of labor leveled down, fragmented, and therefore unfree, is conceived as the source of private property's perniciousness and of its existence in estrangement from men. For instance, Fourier, who, like the physiocrats, also conceives agricultural labor to be at least the exemplary type, whereas Saint-Simon declares in contrast that industrial labor as such is the essence, and accordingly aspires to the exclusive rule of the industrialist and the improvement of the worker's condition. Finally, communism is the positive expression of annulled private property, at first as universal private property. So that first sentence, the transcendence of self-estrangement follows the same course as self-estrangement, a pretty Hegelian point. You see, it reminds me of the whole Hegelian motif of the being of things is their becoming. So, you know, in their being is their doing. the movement of overcoming estrangement is simply through the being of estrangement. So private property is first considered only in its subjective aspect, but nevertheless with labor as its essence. So here he's talking about private properties in the means of production. I'm not quite sure really what he means by that. That is, I don't know if that's just his consideration or if he's saying that somehow this is everyone's consideration. It's a historical consideration. People first recognize that there is private property in the means of production, but then, they don't recognize that labor is its essence, or maybe they do recognize that labor is its essence, but they still, privilege private property in the relation.
Yeah, I don't think it's really important who is considering it, but it is considered in this way.
Its form of existence is therefore capital, which is to be annulled as such. So here's, a point that if private property is capital, then, private property has to be gotten rid of. It's got to be not changed, it doesn't have to change hands, but rather completely annulled. Or a particular form of labor leveled down, fragmented and therefore free, is conceived as the source of private property's perniciousness and of its existence in estrangement from men. So this is important, I think. It seems to hit on the point which, in that essay that I haven't put out yet on my blog about about the nature of surplus, about the claims that capital is stealing from labor. That when people make that claim, they're making that claim on the basis of a legitimate claim on private property. That is, the worker does everything. They are the ones who labor. They're the ones who do the physical labor. Therefore, they are the ones who deserve the proceeds of labor. Because that is the criterion of who gets to rightfully claim property. And here it seems Marx is going against that. He's saying privileging a particular form of labor as the legitimating factor of private property and saying those are the people who really should own things is sort of wrong-headed. Saying that one particular... actually, who was it? What's that guy's name? Sauvage? Something Sauvage.
Mm-hmm.
You know who I'm talking about? Eden Sauvage. Yeah, left communist guy. What was it? Josh, didn't you say he he put out a blog or something talking about something on this? I know he put out recently, the latest blog that I saw people post about was one in which he literally commits this very same error of the only people who rightfully get claims on anything are the people who produce. So he fetishizes industrial labor, productive physical labor, quote unquote. And everyone else, literally everyone else, is leeches. If you're an intellectual, you're a leech. If you're a capitalist, you're a leech. If you're a manager, you're a leech. If you're a firefighter, you're a leech. If you're not the one who's producing the physical goods which everyone else consumes, apparently you're a leech, and you don't have a right to claim anything of the proceeds of labor in society.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I've read that one. I remember hearing about him writing something about how intellectuals are just leeches.
Yeah, and so that's...
Oh, yeah. That's the guy.
Yeah, and I think that's falling for a fetishism of this kind, fetishizing one certain kind of labor as the legitimating principle of, ownership claims. Whether you call it property or not, it doesn't matter. The fact that you can say these people deserve it and these people don't is a matter of legitimate claims on property.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you guys agree with my interpretation here that this is basically a general critique of privileging private property in any form, whether it is capital or labor.
Yeah, I mean, he's obviously critiquing the traditional socialist conception. It's not a matter of who owns it, it's a matter of and
Ownership.
capital.
Definitely agree, Grouch.
So finally, communism is the positive expression of the annulled private property, at first as universal private property. And so I think this is actually going to go into communism. Communism, private property.
Scary.
Well, I mean, when he's saying universal private property, he's talking about the abolition of property, correct?
Well, he's talking about first the very thing left communists deny about the transitional phase in which the state, or a state, something analogous to a state, owns everything. The community owns everything. The state owns everything. Everything that was quote-unquote private property.
Well, universal ownership isn't ownership at all, really, because property is only property as long as someone's excluded. When it's universal, when no one's excluded, it's not property.
But that's the thing. That's kind of the idea, I think. But it also doesn't quite work. It isn't an oxymoron. There is a sense in which you do have universal private property, just as in how in capitalism you have universalized individuality. Like it's a dialectical contradiction, but it makes sense. So continuing, by embracing this relation as a whole, communism is one. In its first form, only a generalization and consummation of this relation, that is, of private property. As such, it appears in a twofold form. On the one hand, the dominion of material property bulks so large that it wants to destroy everything which is not capable of being possessed by all as private property. It wants to disregard talent, etc., in an arbitrary manner. For it, the sole purpose of life and existence is direct physical possession. The category of the worker is not done away with, but extended to all men. The relationship of private property persists as the relationship of the community to the world of things. Finally, this movement of opposing universal private property to private property finds expression in the brutish form of opposing to marriage, certainly a form of exclusive private property, the community of woman, in which a woman becomes a piece of communal and common property. It may be said that this idea of the community of woman gives away the secret of this as yet completely crude and thoughtless communism. So here he's critiquing, he's not advocating this, but he's critiquing a certain idea of communism.
No, definitely. Marx in personal matters was rather conservative.
There's a footnote.
So footnote 30, Marx refers to the rise of the primitive, crude egalitarian tendencies among the representatives of utopian communism at the early stages of its development. Among the medieval religious communistic communities in particular, there was current a notion of the common possession of woman as a feature of the future society depicted in the spirit of consumer communism ideals. In 1534-35, the German Anabaptists who seized power in Munster, or how do you say that, Hyperion? Munster, tried to introduce polygamy in accordance with this view. Tommaso Campanella, the author of Civitas Solis, early 17th century, rejected monogamy in his ideal society. The primitive communistic communities were also characterized by asceticism and a hostile attitude to science and works of art. Some of these primitive equalitarian features, the negative attitude to the arts in particular, were inherited by the communist trends of the first half of the 19th century. For example, by the members of the French secret societies of the 1830s and 40s, worker egalitarians, humanitarians, and so on, comprising the followers of Babu. For a characterization of these, see Engels' Progress of Social Reform on the Continent. Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, Collected Works, Volume 3, page 316, 396, 97. I don't know why I read that. I usually don't. It's Hyperion rubbing off on me.
Well, now they know. They can go exactly to the page.
So, on the one hand, reading back again, on the one hand, the dominion of material property books so large that it wants to destroy everything that is not capable of being possessed by all as private property. So, if if it's not enough for everybody to have it, then no one should have it at all. So it's a sort of universalization of private property in the sense that a lot of people do think that we'll get rid of private property by superproduction. That if everybody can have it, there'll be no reason to even call it for people to think in terms of property because everybody has one. If you lose it, even if you lose it, there'll be so much that you can just go and get it anytime. So the notion of property goes away. You don't care, like, that's mine, because you can just replace it. There are problems with that, of course, because it's not just things aren't just objects of utility for people. People get attached to certain things. People have a lot of things. There's a lot of things with private property which are more than just simply a use thing.
Yeah, there's sentimental value.
Like a trophy.
But
a trophy has no use. You never use it. It just sits on your cabinet. But it has value.
Excuse me, I drink mead out of my first grade elementary school trophy.
I would too. I mean, it's a fucking cup, man. Why not?
But still, in the way that most people use trophies, it isn't. It doesn't derive its value from its use.
Well, yes and no.
But that's
its use is literally just have for show. That is a use.
Yeah.
Use is not simply
something that capitalists care about.
Yeah, use is not something.
We as communists don't give a shit about.
Use is like something that. Use is something that literally is for whatever ends that you have. It doesn't have to be a physical use. It doesn't have to be a practical use. Even though that's weird,
Yeah.
There is a sense in which almost everything literally is practical no matter what.
Well, yeah, then in the sense that many socialists say, where capitalists claim the means of production is ingenuine because they don't use it, is bullshit.
All right, so let's continue on. The relationship of private property persists as the relationship of the community to the world of things. So I'm not quite sure what he's saying there. So, there's no capitalist. So, I skipped a sentence.
You sued.
It wants to disregard talent, etc., in an arbitrary manner. I don't know what he's meaning there. What I can think of is it makes sense if he's talking about how possession has nothing to do with merit. You don't get this because you're talented and you're the one who deserves it most because you can use it best or whatever. So it also isn't based on how hard you work.
Like a type of meritocracy, not exactly meritocracy.
Yeah, it's not. It disregards meritocracy. That's what I'm thinking. Because everybody must have it for it to be like legitimate.
Mm-hmm.
For it, the sole purpose of life and existence is direct physical possession. So it's a sort of a, he says it later, a sort of consumerist communism. Like the point is to have things. That's the point of life and existence, is direct possession of things.
Yeah.
The category of the worker is not done away with, but extended to all men. So the community owns all. It owns the means of production, blah blah blah. So everybody's a worker for the community as capitalist. And
Sounds horrible.
then he mentions the marriage thing, in which literally some people definitely, not some, but I think it was an all too common idea back then that marriage was a relationship of property. That you owned your wife, and that's exactly how women were treated. Yeah. So continuing on from where we left off before going back. Just as a woman passes from marriage to general prostitution, prostitution is only a specific expression of the general prostitution of the laborer, and since it is a relationship in which falls not the prostitute alone, but also the one who prostitutes, and the latter's abomination is still greater, the capitalist, etc., also comes under his head. Note by Marx. So this is interesting because
Not
people
that.
ask.
Footnote.
Well, we'll read after my comment.
Yeah, it's not
this is
important.
interesting because this comes up after all on Lefty Poll and a lot of places all the time. Is prostitution labor? Should prostitution be legalized? Are prostitutes like leeches on productive society, or are they producing something? Blah blah blah. And this is a point which a lot of people bring up, and I don't think they read this section of Marx. So they're just coming up with it because it's a very easy analogy to make, actually, in which Marx says, well, look, literally, technically, we're all prostitutes. We all have to sell ourselves for a living. The prostitution of the woman is just a specific expression of the general prostitution of labor. The woman has to sell her body. We have to sell our specific labors.
There's a song by the pop group called Just That. We are all prostitutes.
We are all prostitutes.
Yeah, it's a critique of capitalism. Yeah. Everybody has their price.
I would bet you they've read this.
It's actually very possible that they did read this.
Oh, I'm sure they did. For most people, the legalization of prostitution, though, is more of a moral thing than a, is it labor type thing. And I think that's wrong, We should consider it labor.
Well, yeah, and I think the distinction is made that there's something just essentially like far more devious and pernicious about prostitution than any other kind of labor. Like, it's somehow more degrading, it's somehow more morally abominable. And I think Marx here is right in saying, well, how? I personally just find that to be a moralist Christian thing of, if you don't make a big hubbub about sex is really not that. It's not a big deal for certain people.
Instrumental activity, yeah.
Yeah, for them it's just like, Yeah. I know people like this.
Note that it's with the consideration that there is no pimp involved or anything. I don't agree with pimpry.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I don't agree with that. If prostitution is legalized, not in that
or
sense.
Coerced prostitution.
Maybe we should be like the Anabaptists who took over in the Germantown and just share women.
Yeah, that was in Argentina.
I wonder if that was in what town?
What?
Where Calvin lived in this one town, like the city, for a bit of his life, and that city was overrun for a while by these heretical Christians of this sort, who thought about who were radicals.
Geneva?
Was it Geneva? I don't know if that.
I
know he was
lived
in Geneva.
in Geneva. Yeah, I don't know if it was
no,
that
he
town.
was in some other town, I think.
The Mormons do it in America all the time. You just take over a city.
Take over city, legalize polygamy.
Take over.
Well, if we're to
Mid-
have communal property of women, can we have communal property of men as well?
And they didn't think about that one now, did they?
It's not advocating for either,
I mean-
obviously, but sure.
I mean, like,
Well,
don't
I
know.
think, well, isn't it like literally reciprocal in that sense? That, you know, if a guy's sleeping with many
I guess
women,
so.
well, women is also sleeping with many guys.
Aha,
Sure.
yes, it is.
Unless,
I think
But whatever.
one of the arguments against polygamy is against like Mormonism, because they just end up forming these communities that are very authoritarian, but also it just renders love as something purely animalistic.
Yeah. But that's like neither here nor there for me. Like, there are people who can do it in a, you know,
I can't.
I can't, yeah. If
Yeah, me
they
neither.
can, you know, that's their life. Like, I'm not gonna stop them. Like, there's nothing I see that's evil in it, or like children being raised in that or whatever. It's just a personal, social matter.
Yeah, so long as everyone involved is consenting, I have no problem.
So, right, continuing. Let's just reread that whole thing. And
Yeah.
just as a woman passes from marriage to general prostitution, so the entire world of wealth, that is, of man's objective substance, passes from the relationship of exclusive marriage with the owner of private property to a state of universal prostitution with the community. So, you know, it's no different from having a single capitalist, individual capitalist that you work for, and to have a universal capitalist that you work for. Your personal life in relation to that capitalist doesn't change.
Yeah,
For
that's
the
why
most
co-ops are
part.
kind of That's why co-ops are kind of bullshit. I don't want to slave away for like a collective of people.
Well, see, that's kind of the intention I'm reading here, but I think that's just de facto not true. Like, come on, there is a big difference between working with a guy who only sees you, who's the sole owner, and only sees you as a thing to create wealth, and working for a company in which you are part of the ownership, and you are part of the directives, the board of directors who, you know, goes, can we expand? Are we gonna, like, you know, do this? How much are we gonna pay for vacation? You have a say, and a co-op will pay you far more than those other people, and they will treat you far better. So, you know, this idea of, but it's self-exploitation. Are you fucking crazy?
Yeah, but it's usually like done on like a really small scale, and
yeah, but even then, it is what it is. I mean, there's a co-op here in Northern California. Like, they make donuts, and it's literally a single small donut factory. And each they have like 40 employees, and each of them makes $40,000 a year. And I think $40,000 a year for 40 people in one small donut factory. And they're a co-op, and like, they don't sell more expensive than anybody else. It's literally just, that's what happens when you divide the profits equally. Give me that. I want it. I will totally take it. I will fucking pump out all the donuts that you want me to for $40,000 a year, and vacation, paid
that would be
vacation
like
too.
A privilege.
Yeah, it's a privilege.
Yeah, that's
I mean,
almost a privilege today in the world.
like,
To have a nice job.
But self-exploitation, give it to me. I like to exploit myself. I would like, if it makes my life better and it's not too bad, I will do it. Because, I mean, I'm getting exploited by some other guy all the same anyways. I might as well make it nicer for me.
Yeah,
so
you have more money and are treated nicer and have more of a say in your company.
Yeah, so if you have a say, I think, a real say, not like, say, like the Soviet Union where people really didn't have a say, I think it makes all the world of a difference to have that relationship. But you gotta have a real say, otherwise, you know, it just doesn't work out.
Sure.
So
Okay.
continuing.
Yeah.
This type of communism, since it negates the personality of man in every sphere, is but the logical expression of private property, which is this negation. General envy, constituting itself as a power, is the disguise in which greed reestablishes itself and satisfies itself only in another way. The thought of every piece of private property as such is at least turned against wealthier private property in the form of envy and the urge to reduce things to a common level, so that this envy and urge even constitute the essence of competition. Crude communism is only the culmination of this envy and of this leveling down proceeding from the preconceived minimum. It has a definite, limited standard. How little this annulment of private property is really an appropriation is in fact proved by the abstract negation of the entire world of culture and civilization, the regression to the unnatural simplicity of the poor and crude man who has few needs and who has not only failed to go beyond private property, but has not yet even reached it. So I mean, this sounds like Nietzsche to me.
Nietzsche?
I was thinking exactly that.
Yeah, it's the communism of envy. I think Nietzsche talks
Yeah.
about this kind of thing.
Yeah, that is
It's
true.
absolutely what he talks about.
I mean, this is the communism of people who says, like, why should a doctor be paid? A doctor shouldn't be paid more than a janitor or something. There's no difference. Everybody, works in society. We're all equal. And Marx is saying here, what are you talking about? That's stupid. That people should not have more than others. And this is one of the passages in which you can totally tell that Marx is not an egalitarian in the sense of everyone deserves to have, equal outcome in the end.
Yeah.
that only makes things more unequal.
Well, and actually, it also creates resentment, because if you work harder than the other guy and you get the same, believe me, you hate it. I work at a job in which that happens. You work your ass off, but there's other people in the warehouse who just aren't pulling their weight, and it makes you hate them. Because you're getting paid the same shit at the end of the day, but you're the one doing more work.
Yeah.
It's like you want to be recognized for what you do and how much you do. It's not just like, oh, well, we need each other. I'm sorry, but some other people do more and deserve more.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, as Karl Marx always says, from each according to his ability. Marx isn't a fan of slackers.
Yeah, so the slogan of socialism is from each according to their ability to each according to their contribution.
Yep.
Yeah, it's distinct from the slogan of communism, which is from each according to his ability to each according to his need. Which, I don't know how that would function really.
Well, it's an idealistic claim, in my opinion. Like, it doesn't actually mean anything, because what are needs? What needs is he talking about? Are they biological needs? Are they just like needs of just?
Everyone gets food.
Yeah, I mean, are you talking about any
food they want.
needs? like lonely needs need a girlfriend. They need sex.
No, that's not a need.
It just sounds like a basic need.
But
It's
it is a need.
do as much as you can. You
Yeah,
get more.
maybe he would like the Anabaptists.
Not the need he's talking about, though.
No, okay. No, when he says to each according to his need, like, he's talking about capitalist need, the need of just luxury. Because the need of culture is a luxury need. The need of society, of being an individual, is a luxury need.
Sure, but the state's not going to provide a girlfriend for you.
What not? It will when we have techno-communism.
It will when
Not if you're
the Anabaptists come back again.
Look, when robot, AI, and
Oh,
androids are
okay.
well built enough, you bet your ass we are gonna have state-given waifus.
Why not?
The
They
other day
better
I had
be
a
cat girls and they better be traps.
The other day
That's
I had
all
a
I want.
conversation if it's ethical to have sex with an android if you can only say yes.
Oh, God.
That's not ethical.
That is
That's not
not
ethics.
That I care about at all.
Yeah,
That's
it's not actually an ethical question, by the way.
It's just a robot.
It's
Who
part of
cares?
programming. Well, okay. Well, I don't know.
So, anyways, to finish that section off, it has a definite limited standard. How little this annulment of private property is really an appropriation is in fact proved by the abstract negation of the entire world of culture and civilization, the regression to the unnatural simplicity of the poor and crude man who has few needs and who has not only failed to go beyond private property but has not yet even reached it. So the annulment of private property in general, where like nobody really owns anything, everything really is just owned by everybody, is seemingly here, according to Marx, a regression. Regression inferior to the phase of private property. Its freedom is less, its spiritual achievements are less, its culture and civilization is poorer.
He mentions how the poor man who lives in this society has few needs, and I think Marx would agree with us that we must demand more.
Yeah, like
Man the
what is
most.
it? We are kind of consumer socialists here, like a la Zizek, where Zizek says, it's like that's kind of what we want. That's the whole point of this whole ideal of technology in society. Just have like the possibility of more shit. Why not? I mean, it's what life is. It's not what life is for. It's not to just consume, but it's also have the freedom of just frivolity. We didn't need the internet, but now that we have it, we sure fucking love it.
Yeah, I think there's this common misconception about leftists and luxury, that it's somehow bad. But no, the point of socialism, communism for me is to allow everyone access to luxurious items and luxurious experiences.
Yeah, definitely.
Otherwise, what are we doing this for? Just to live in a poor country? I mean,
to live in harmony with nature. That's why.
in harmony with nature.
If you don't live in a
covered in
mud
dirt.
hut, you don't live in a mud hut in Asia somewhere, you're a first worldist.
Anarcho-primitivism.
Yeah, I mean, we're not hedonists, of course.
Yeah. If anyone wants that communion with nature or whatever, I mean, I want that occasionally, but I don't want to have to live like that forever. That's fine. That's up to them. That's what freedom is. It's the freedom to choose what you want.
It's like, I want stupid shit, like really stupid shit.
Yeah.
Like, I want like there to be like a town of just dogs and people who take care of those dogs. And like you just go to that town. It's like welcome to the town of fucking dogs. And it's just happy dogs everywhere of all kinds.
Communism for dogs.
Yeah,
Why not?
And why not have that? Because, we just like dogs. And, it'd be nice to go to a city full of dumb dogs.
Yeah. Human dog.
Human
I
dogs.
have a better idea. It's like dog communism, but like we're
free
slaves to them.
roaming human dogs.
It's only communism for the dogs, not for the humans. We have to be their slaves.
Josh, is my mic okay now?
Yeah,
I guess I was
Yeah, it
talking
is.
slowly because I was I'm tired, I guess. It's midnight. But yeah, the acquisition of nice things is not a bad thing. It's not just bourgeois decadence. The problem that I have is the current spectacle presents items that aren't luxurious as luxurious.
Oh yeah.
But we all want like good items. Like I want items that don't break all the time, which aren't subject to planned obsolescence or.
Yeah, but how does
Turns
this relate
out,
to private property?
Turns out socialism was
Sorry,
really good at. Turns out socialism was really good at creating quality items that last for a long time. Like I found like headphones from like socialist Yugoslavia. They were probably like 50 years old or something, and I tried them out. They still work. So.
But did they sound good?
Yeah, that did sound good. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously you're gonna get like certain issues, but you know, these days I change headphones almost weekly, monthly,
Yeah.
maybe.
What it has to do with the means of production is that when we own the means of production, we can all produce all this nice shit for everyone. Why not?
Well, yeah, I don't know. I think it's also because one could take from this critique of like people who say like, well, private property must be abolished immediately. The people who, by the way, I was aping on lefty people. People can't tell when I'm fucking joking or not. Good for them. But anyways, that people like Rafik who says like, oh, we must get rid of all private property. Everything must be communally owned. This is exactly what Marx is critiquing.
Yeah, people who
people
say
like
Lenin
him.
was people who say Lenin was a liberal because he didn't
part of the
introduce full
Stockton
communism
Party.
day one.
Oh, I think part of when Marx says, again, the man who has few needs, he might be talking about how the man in this society may only like need, you know, material goods. He mentions it earlier in the
Yeah.
paragraph.
The
Let me
means of
find it.
subsistence.
Well, he has.
Yeah, I mean, he's critiquing the
Yeah,
the
he
utopian
says, like,
socialists.
the purpose. He said the sole purpose of life and existence is direct physical possession. But Marx doesn't believe this is the only purpose of life,
No, definitely
obviously.
not. Yeah, but he's critiquing like the kind of utopian socialists who think that all this technology is corrupting us. He's not Heidegger. Not saying that
Yeah.
Heidegger was against like technology or anything. I haven't read on technology. Probably should. I will sometime.
You cut out a lot. I wanted to clarify. He said he doesn't believe, like Heidegger, that all technology corrupts us.
Yeah, I don't think Heidegger believes that either because I haven't fucking read it. So I'm talking in my ass.
Yeah.
But anyway, some people do believe that, and so they wanted to regress to a more natural way of living. And Marx is not that kind of person. He definitely thinks, heck yeah, fuck yes, science and technology and super production of stuff. So continuing, the community is only a community of labor and equality of wages paid out by communal capital, by the community as the universal capitalist. Both sides of the relationship are raised to an imagined universality, labor as the category in which every person is placed, and capital as the acknowledged universality and power of that community. Dun dun dun, guess what fits that bill? USSR, China, Cuba. And I forget who. I think Wolf and a few other people like mentioned this like as a sort of joke. Even Winfield mentions this, that he says like the reason that the 1844 manuscripts were not published in Russia was most likely specifically because of this passage.
Yeah.
Because it was a
neither
direct
was,
critique. It was a direct critique of what the USSR was.
Neither was Grundrisse. It was banned.
Yeah. I thought it was not translated.
Yeah, could it be
Are you talking-
banned? Could it be banned if like the whole point was like people better not know about this?
Yeah.
I don't think it was banned. Just like they never bothered letting anybody know.
I know Lenin didn't read it.
He didn't know. He didn't know those existed.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it wasn't published until after he died.
Yeah.
I don't know how much years.
Kotsky.
that's what I
It was Kotsky who
Oh,
had that archive for until he died, and then all that stuff got transferred to Russia. A lot of stuff got transferred to the Soviet Union.
How did Kotsky get this collection of Marx's
He
work?
just
He was
kept it
friends
in
with
the
him.
basement.
Well, no, he was
Because
friends
it
with them.
was
Like they
no-
left like
Yeah, I
like
know,
he was
but,
left the
like,
stuff by
Marx,
Engels. Yeah, well, but they were still
Marx
friends.
thought
like,
he was
they
a
never.
dunce, but yeah, they were still friends.
Also,
but
Engels.
like in Marx's private letters, he's like, Kotsky is just an idiot.
Yeah, but I don't know.
The private letters probably weren't shown to Kotsky,
Yeah,
and
he
the
was
Engels became more liberal by the end of his life. So
Really? I did not know that. I mean, I don't know anything about Engels.
Oh,
yeah,
People
he
say
said
that
some
about Marx, but I find that to be a mischaracterization.
Yeah, he said some stuff about like, yeah, reformism. It's okay.
Okay, well,
That's
anybody
not
who
necessarily.
says, yeah, that's not liberalism, like, that's just being real, man. Like, that's literally doing the thing that Marx says very early on, the real movement of things. Well, guess what the real movement is? It isn't just this ideal claim of, we gotta have communism now,
Yeah.
and we gotta have
Yeah,
revolution
that's not what I'm
now.
Uh,
That
saying.
doesn't help.
That's not
we're
what I'm
going to do
saying.
this thing, and
He
then
was
they're
like,
like, well, that's not real communism, so I'm not helping.
yeah, that's bullshit.
Yeah.
Engels was more like rejecting revolution and violent revolution as a whole.
Oh, did
Period.
he?
Just yeah, I think he did. I'm pretty sure I read that somewhere.
Well, I'll have to check that out. Gotta verify. I shall trust but verify. If you know what if you know what that refers to.
I don't.
You weren't around for Gamergate.
Oh no.
I don't know anything about
Yeah,
it.
yeah. No, don't mind it. Let's continue. Finish up this one section, and then we'll continue the other section some other time. In the approach to woman as the spoil and handmaid of communal lust is expressed the infinite degradation in which man exists for himself. For the secret of this approach has its unambiguous, decisive, plain, and undistinguished expression in the relation of man to woman in the manner in which the direct and natural species relationship is conceived. The direct, natural, and necessary relation of person to person is the relation of man to woman. In this natural species relationship, man's relation to nature is immediately his relation to man, just as his relation to man is immediately his relation to nature, his own natural destination. In this relationship, therefore, is sensuously manifested, reduced to an observable fact, the extent to which the human essence has become nature to man, and to which nature to him has become the human essence of man. From this relationship, one can therefore judge man's whole level of development. From the character of this relationship follows how much man, as a species being, as man, has come to be himself and to comprehend himself. The relationship of man to woman is the most natural relation of human being to human being. It therefore reveals the extent to which man's natural behavior has become human, or the extent to which the human essence in him has become unnatural essence. The extent to which his human nature has come to be natural to him. This relationship also reveals the extent to which man's need has become a human need, the extent to which, therefore, the other person as a person has become for him a need, the extent to which he in his individual existence is at the same time a social being. So, the way I understood that was this is a critique of how lowly that this conception was even one that was had by so-called socialists and communists, is a show of how lowly or we have come to see ourselves. That in seeing woman as something to be owned, communally owned, it just shows how little we consider of ourselves. It's what is a woman? What is love? Nothing but that social, what that animal desire, that lust. It's not love. It's not a human relationship. It's just a relationship of a man to an object of lust.
Aristotle, this makes me think about Aristotle, how in the Nicomachean Ethics, when he talks about friendship, he notes that friendship is in fact not just love of the friend, but love of yourself. Marx is kind of making a similar point, I think.
Yeah, so, when he says, therefore, the other person as a person has become for him a need, that shows, how far we have come. This is actually related to stuff about recognition in Hegel. That the greatest need of humans is really recognition. And what is not recognition other than a reciprocal relationship of the desire to be desired by the person you desire. And not to be desired as an object, but to be desired as a person, to be desired as who you are.
Yeah.
So nobody wants to be loved just because they're hot. Nobody who lives who really, I mean, and I think this is true, regardless of how people show. that nobody can be happy in a sort of relationship in which they know that who they are doesn't actually matter, that they are nothing but the shell of flesh to other people.
Might be okay for a while, but it isn't lasting.
Yeah,
there's
so
nothing more dangerous for a loved person to be love for something that they're not, like an ideal, rather than what they effectively are.
an ideal.
You know,
Oh no,
like
I mean
fitting
that's
the
funny.
word
No,
that
it's
comes
it's
from
fittingly worded
Yeah.
because it goes exactly both in the common sense and the Hegelian sense.
Yeah, I know.
Literally, you
I'm
love an abstraction.
yeah, exactly. I
God,
had
I
to
love
get a
when that.
good one.
Yeah, I love when that happens. It's God fucking Hegel. So
Yeah, I love like the moments of wordplay that come with Hegelian thinking.
Well, but you said that love isn't a contract between two egoists or something.
Yeah, his
I
Embrace of
think that
Love is
was
really
Really?
Max
good.
Stirner.
that sounds weird.
Yeah. Badiou's Embrace of Love is really good. It's probably the worst. I mean, the worst, best text on love I know of.
Freudian slip.
I'll
Yeah.
have to read that because I don't know.
I thought of Badiou and I thought worst, but I was like, no, he actually did something of worth. No, I'm just kidding. I just haven't read him. Besides
alright.
Embrace of Love.
Yeah, so
I don't want any Badiouians after me. We already made an enemy of left comms, Marxists and Leninists.
people who are irrelevant.
Oh, the Bedouins are coming.
The losers.
Well, I mean, they're all Maoists, and we already pissed off the Maoists, so.
No, you're gonna
Okay,
get
I don't know how
posted
people could
on
get pissed off at that. Like, we didn't even say anything.
Bediou discussion.
Like, just to put it out there, I've
Okay,
said
so
it
we
multiple
agree with him
times.
here at the end where he says that
So,
a
okay,
relation
hello, can you hear me?
of person to person is the relation of man to woman, and so on and so on.
Hello.
Yeah. Did you read that last sentence? I know I read it, but I didn't remember if you read it. The last one before.
No. So the first, so finishing off that section, the first positive annulment of private property, crude communism, is thus merely a manifestation of the vileness of private property, which wants to set itself up as the positive community system. So, dialectics, basically. You know, if you want to get rid of private property as an abstract negation, what you end up is basically the most pernicious aspects of private property generalized to everything. So, agree, disagree? I mean, I'm not quite sure.
I'm not sure either.
Wait, what? What did you ask? Sorry.
How about that last sentence? Do you agree with it? That this first crude form of communism as the manifestation of the violence of private property, which wants to set itself up as the positive community system. That in trying to
The
like
community-
abstract, that when the community tries to abstractly negate private property by universalizing it, it just makes it all. It really is just the worst parts of private property without any of the positives.
Yeah. Don't tell that to the people who haven't read Marx and spout this all the time, though.
Well, I think I absolutely agree, actually, because how he understands property earlier in this essay, he says that it is, he says it's capital, and I think you have some of the worst effects of social capital in this society that he's describing.
Yeah, people don't think about that. Where even if you get rid of technical money capital, social capital always comes into play. You know, people. There are people. people form groups around other people's, ideologies and whatnot. They followings and cliques form and tendencies form, and God, we see it all the time on the left. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm a Marxist. Well, I'm a Bakuninist. I'm like a Leninist. I'm a Maoist. Well, why?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think as communists, we shouldn't just declare ourselves enemies of economic capital. Social capital is definitely
social
it's
capital
become an
is
absolute.
dangerous. Well, yeah, it's that one existed far before capital itself existed as money capital, material capital, and it will exist after it too, because influence becomes centralized in certain individuals. The point I wanted to make by saying, Marxist or Leninist and Marxist, Maoist, whatever, is that people that just defer to these other people's opinions or whatever they say, and say, well, Marx didn't say that, as if we should care what Marx says just because Marx said it.
Yeah.
People argue this stuff all the time. Well, that's not what Marx said. And I'm like, why do you care? I don't care. Like, honestly, I don't care.
Think about it for yourself, really.
Yeah, Marx also called a guy a Jewish nigger, so like.
We almost
Plus,
made
like,
it.
none of these people that they worship wanted a cult of personality. Marx didn't want a cult of
Except for
personality.
Mao. Well, no, except for Mao.
Well,
Mao wanted it.
Yeah, but Stalin, he like fucking hated his cult of personality. As I've said many times, Marx wanted us to read him critically. He did not consider himself a Marxist. He pretty much hated his followers.
Yeah, of all the people who would hate Marxist, Marx would be it, and Marx would probably hate left comms quite a lot.
Yeah, the point I wanted to make is...
they're like acolytes, or...
Yeah, as I say in my shitty article that...
Your shitty liberal revisionist.
Yeah, my liberal revisionist article. Well, okay, the point I wanted to make is that when you say something like I'm a Maoist, when you say you're a Marxist, in abstract, it either means A, that you entertain their ideas, or that you dogmatically follow them and no one can tell what. So to say you're a Maoist, to say you're a Marxist, it's kind of like, okay, what do you mean by that? Do you agree with every single word that Marx ever said? Well, he doesn't agree with every word that he said because he changed his opinions. That's what people do when they discover new knowledge. If you're a Maoist, does that mean you should want what Mao said? You should know by now that it's not possible, or sustainable at least. So yeah, just try to be critical of your own tendency, I would say.
So, yeah.
You need to self-crit.
Yeah. Mao struggle sessions.
All right, so one last point on to bring it back to property. I just have this inkling that by private property, he really doesn't just mean capital. He really does mean property in general. Like, I don't think when he says, the whole thing, it's though at the beginning where it's not just about the issue of haves and haves not. By saying, like, the real thing, the determinate form that it has now as labor and capital is in a Hegelian sense of, the truth of things, that the full development of this whole logic of property leads to that end, in which you will have the haves and the haves not as labor and capital. And so when he's talking about private property, I really don't think that he's really talking about just the means of production. I think he's really talking about, he has to be talking about the logic of private property itself, which is, by the way, exactly what he proves in Capital. If people don't realize it, and by the way, I literally just had that dawn on me right now. That's what Capital proves. The logic of capital, the logic of commodities, is what leads to this necessary division later on between labor and capital. That the very idea of property, not just private property as a means of production, but the idea of private property as things that I own and can do with as I will. That means I can consume them, I can use them for whatever I want, and also I can exchange them. That if that is allowed its full range of development and freedom, it necessarily will generate capital and labor distinctions. So when I was saying, like, in the lefty pole thing, where people say, oh, but there's personal and private property, I don't think you can say that. I really don't. I think that if you really are going to be consistent as a Marxist, you got to bite the bullet and realize he really is talking about private property in total. That it has to be that way. Otherwise, the argument just seems to be arbitrary and broken, and it doesn't really have any necessity.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think I'm reading too much into this?
You're full of shit. You're a pseudo-intellectual. You don't know what you're talking about. No, I agree.
Yeah, I think you're like actually. I think you're spot on.
Yeah. Hitting
Yeah.
on some things
I
that
mean,
are not apparent.
The usual distinction between private and personal property is the most slippery slope, arbitrary thing.
Yeah, and that's the problem. I mean, people don't realize it because it seems such a useful thing. You're like, oh, that's wonderful. I can talk to my liberal friends and not scare them by saying, no, you can still have personal things. But the reality is you actually can't. Because if I have personal things, it means I can do whatever the heck I want,
Yeah.
If I get this one thing from, like, the community store, I can do whatever I want with that thing. Suppose that thing is rare. And suppose, that the price in the store is just less than the price you can get in a black market. Why can't I sell it? Why can't I exchange it? What would stop me? It's mine, right? Why shouldn't I be able to? And yet other people will have to cut you. For socialists, they have to come up with this whole scheme of, like, well, no, you can't do that. We'll make it illegal.
Yeah.
And then the question is, well, then how do I own it? How's this shit mine if I can't do with it what I want? How can it be mine if I can't even give it away or exchange it? It doesn't make any sense. To have private property is to, unfortunately, logically, have the relations of what private property allows you to do, which one of them is exactly commodity exchange. And if you have commodity exchange, you can have capital be generated naturally. It's just the logic of private property playing itself out in mass. But people don't think about it. People don't realize that slippery slope isn't just a slippery slope of a maybe. It's a definite will be. But other than that,
there's still restrictions on property, even capitalism, bro. Like, you can't. There's, like, regulations. You can't shoot up a school if you own a gun.
Oh yeah, but those are other, like, things
Yeah,
beyond that. Like, those are social relations
Yeah.
beyond the property as property. I'm talking about property in other
property
senses.
relations.
So, for example, you can shoot your gun or do all the whatever the fuck you want in your own fucking house. You can just don't, so long as you can keep it from going to anybody else's shit, you're fine. You can shoot up your walls if your walls are bullet resistant and they don't go shooting through your neighbor's wall and kill someone. You can shoot up your roof, so long as the bullets don't go and, come raining down to some school 500 yards away or something. So that's fine. And I think that's, if you want to do that, if you want to be a moron and destroy your own house or whatever, fine by me. Like, fine by me. It's your fucking house. If you want to have dicks drawn all over your walls, fine by me. But, I mean, of course, there always are restrictions on private property, but what private property as such is not necessarily restricted. And once you start putting some restrictions that aren't rational in certain ways, the question comes up, well, why can't I? Why can't I sell my PlayStation, when some guy's willing to offer me $800 when I paid only $200? Why shouldn't I? And, people say, well, it's the logic of exploitation. Well, so what? It's an agreement with two people. If some guy's a moron and it's just, like, really psychologically driven and just really wants it, why not? That's their own business. This whole idea, well, we got to save people from their own stupidity, to me, is quite stupid.
Yeah, the freedom that is genuine freedom is the freedom to be stupid.
Yeah, the freedom to be stupid, the freedom to fuck up.
Freedom
I mean,
to fuck up, to have consequences for your errant actions.
you know, so one of the things I disagree with socialists and communists alike is this idea that comes with, like, that people don't think about it. People don't think about what it really will be like. You know, it sounds so great. Oh, you know, the economy will run itself. Everything will be planned. They don't think about how that will actually be like. You know, nowadays, the ease that we have with so many things, like on the spot, is amazing. The amount of shit that can be created that's just completely nonsensical bullshit, and yet which people love, is amazing. And people want those things. And you can say, well, you know, they didn't really want those things. You know, they were desires which were inculcated by society. You know, there was a whole marketing campaign. Yeah, that's true. But at the same time, you can't make people want things they don't really want. In truth. I mean, are some people really... Price. Yeah, it comes at a price. You know, some people are frivolous and stupid, and they just chase whatever things. You know, that's on them. Are we going to stop them? You know, should we, like, have some sort of, like, psychiatric ward for these kind of people? You know, impulsive buyers, shopaholics? Should we help them? Yeah. Are we going to, you know, should we put them in jail for doing what they do? I don't think so. But we're getting off topic. And basically, I think that necessarily he must be talking about private property in total, and it can't just be capital. It just can't be the means of production alone. I think it has to be considered in the full dynamics of what property as such ends up doing.
Mm-hmm. I thought it was a pretty good essay. I really loved his critique of the, you know, the conception of communism that many people had. Communism of wives, pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, this is also a critique of what people think communism is. You know, it's like, oh, you know, everything will be communal, nobody owns anything, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, it's definitely a conception of communism that I've always opposed.
Yeah, and which is also why this is one of the things in which I think we mentioned it before in prior things. You and I, Joshua, where I just like Hegel's system of using terms, in which Hegel just takes words as they're normally used and just adds a little technical spin on it. So it's not wildly different from what you normally like consider. Whereas when people make this distinction between private and personal property, they're breaking the rule of keeping with talking as a normal person talks.
Yeah.
And which is why when people, you're a socialist, says, like, you know, we're against private property, the normal person hears you and you think you're against right.
Mm-hmm. And plus, also, I think with the, you know, the thing about personal and private property is there aren't really any real structures that they're referencing.
Yeah, there is no fundamental distinction. You know, for the normal person, guess what private property is? It is personal property. That's exactly what it is. There is no distinction. The distinction is false. And if you try to tell them the distinction, most of them won't accept it. Because it's kind of obvious. But what we mean by private property is indeed exactly personal property. In personal property, by the way, is not just meant in the my person property, but it becomes personal property in the sense of also corporate properties, entities, legal personal entities.
These days the line is so blurred you can't even tell, like, if our 3D printers personal property or private property.
Well, I mean, the distinction is made as, like, it's private property if it's a means of production which requires more than one person to operate, so to say, to work. But that's just an arbitrary distinction, because that's not what property is based on. Property is just based on the relation of property. You know, is it recognized as property or is it not? Is it enforced as property or is it not? And that's it, you know. a person, and you go and say, it's like, we're going to get rid of your private property, but not your personal property. It doesn't make any sense. People think you're going to get rid of my everything. My personal property is private property. It's private to me. That's what makes it private.
Yeah. What do signs say across, like the road? This is my private property. They don't say this is my personal property. There are no means of production there, really, but
Yeah, so I think people
Do you
who argue
think
from that
the
distinction
communists
are very wrong.
believed in, the communism of women were advocating seizing the means of reproduction?
good joke.
Nah. I think they were seizing the means of pleasure.
Of reproduction.
Nah, of pleasure.
Yeah, just pleasure.
No, but that's not a good pun.
Yeah, but... Yeah. But anyways,
Not
okay,
cap.
so that was section 1 on private property and communism. We'll continue it some other time. This is actually pretty good. I'd read this before, but I hadn't read it like with a really slowing down and thinking about it kind of way. So this was good. I learned some stuff. I will say I was bullshitting in that thread, so take that as you will.
Goodbye.
Yeah, see you next time.